Afternoon. I'm Dónall Flanagan, Teagasc Nursery Stock Advisor, and we're joined by Erwin Weening and Sean Whitworth. So thank you very much for joining us. I'll introduce our event speakers and then cover a quick bit of housekeeping. So at this time of the year, growers' attention can turn to the fine-tuning of their plant production systems. Winter is the ideal time to carry out soil sampling and nutrient analysis. We're fortunate to work in a green sector that has managed surface water pollution very well, with high levels of use of controlled release fertilizer helping to minimize leaching of excess nutrients. However, as EU legislation seeks to eliminate the use of single-use plastics, resin coatings on CRFs or the fertilizers themselves will have to change. But also input costs have been grabbing the headlines more recently, with fertilizer being at the forefront. Teagasc's recent report on horticultural input costs has a kind of an important note that's worth saying. Fertilizer prices are influenced by supply and demand in the market, but also reflect production costs, which are heavily related to energy prices. This is almost trebling of some spot prices since 2020. And spot price for CAN was reported recently at 600 euros a tonne, and I'm sure it's gone up a bit since then. In the horticultural sector, fertilizer is an important input, and controlled release fertilizer and liquid feed fertilizers are particularly affected. The trade stocks are tight currently, and supply and demand dynamics continue to place pressure on price. So, however, as gas prices have begun to fall back since Christmas, we are hopeful to see fertilizer prices decreasing also. With this in mind, the industry is already looking at efficient use and alternatives to straight and synthetic fertilizers. So our two speakers today are Erwin Weening, as I mentioned, and Sean Whitworth. Erwin is Sales Director for DCM, and he's managing the Benelux countries. So DCM's fertilizer history begins in 1976 in Belgium, but now has a global presence. Erwin is, as I mentioned, he's based in the Netherlands, so he'll give a good insight on the operations there. And then Sean Whitworth worked with Fargro in the UK, providing specialist support on growing media and fertilizers. He's a special interest in organics and sustainable growing. In recent years, he's carried out a lot of trials on reduced peat and peat-free growing media and a range of fertilizers. So Sean's based in Lincolnshire and joining us from there today. So thanks very much for joining us, Sean and Erwin.
Thank you for the introduction.
Thank you. I'll hand over to you in a moment. Just a little bit of housekeeping. As I said, we're recording the event. And we're hoping to have everything wrapped up and everyone back at work again by 3:30. We have a poll open, as I mentioned, so we'll have a look at that now in a moment. You can add or submit questions anytime during the presentation. We'll have a quick chance early on after the introduction to just recap on anything if you like, and then we'll have a chat at the end after Erwin and Sean's presentation. Some of you as well have registered to get IASIS points for your continuous professional development, and those will be submitted to IASIS after the event. Okay, so very quick, we'll have a look at the polls and see what the answer is there. So I'll end the poll and share it, and you can all have a look at that. So what sectors are you working in? So we've got 35% in nursery stock, 18% are containerized nursery stock, 18% field production, 18% pot and bedding plants, no one in herbs, and then we've got 24% in cut foliage, and a good few in other sectors. Question number 2, how are you applying fertilizers? So liquid feed is 35%. CRFs, pre-mixed and growing media, is the majority there, it's 47%, and then the others are mixing own growing media, 29%, field broadcast, 29%, field band application 12%, then others 29%. And then the last question is, are you using any of the following? So only synthetic straight fertilizers is 53%. A mix of synthetic fertilizers, CRFs and organics is 29%, and then organic fertilizer only is 18%. So that's an interesting insight to who's joining us, and certainly on their practices as well. Okay, so with that, I'll hand over to Erwin to start the presentation. So thanks very much.
will share my screen. All right, thank you for the introduction. As said before, my name is Erwin Weening. I'm Dutch, and I've been working for the company for 26 years already. And Sean is doing the second part. Lots of trials we've done the last 2-3 years with our products in the UK. The first thing I want to talk about is organic fertilizers. When I started working for this company, we only sold chicken manure or cow manure, added with some minerals into it. The last couple of 15 years, we got a completely different way of organic fertilizers. And that's what I want to talk about, because we want to talk about soil fertility redefined, and we call that the mini grant technology. Why are we using fertilizers? Why are we using the mini grant fertilizer? Because we are looking at healthy plants. And the second thing can be something like consistency, performance, efficiency, or even yield. And we split it up in a biodiversity. And that means that we got about 40 different ingredients. And they could be vegetable ingredients out of plants material, or it could be animal ingredients. Just think about bone meal, blood meal, and all that stuff. And we also use some mineral ingredients. Second thing we have in that mini grant technology is a longevity. We know that all these ingredients, they've got their own way of digesting time. Some stuff is really hard, and that gives you a longevity till about 150 days. And we call that efficient, controlled, organic release. The third thing is how you manufacture a product like that. And we are looking at a product that has a uniform distribution. So if you look at the beginning, the biodiversity, we got about those 40 ingredients, organic ingredients. So not only cow dung or chicken manure or anything like that. All these mixtures of vegetable, animal, and mineral ingredients, they've got their specific own NPK content. So what we try to do is figuring out what's in a product, an organic product, the NPK content. And we also check all these organic ingredients, they are set out of carbon. And that carbon is always a feeding source of soil life itself. Soil life needs to digest that carbon, and then it releases the NPK that's in that product. So we got those 40 ingredients. All these ingredients have their own specific NPK. And for example, I just want to show you, feta meal, they've got a high content of nitrogen. Butternuts or hair meal got a high end nitrogen content. Bones, horns, and all that stuff, they've got a higher phosphorus content. Potassium, we use a lot of sugar beets or grapes or soya. Those products contain a lot of potassium content. And what we try to do is figuring out what's the NPK of all these ingredients and try to mix that into a particular fertilizer with an NPK. But if you look at all these organic products, they don't exist only out of nitrogen or phosphorus or potassium. They also have other essential and even trace elements into it. So all organic fertilizer, they also have trace elements into it. If you look at the difference between a mineral fertilizer or synthetic fertilizer, and you compare that with an organic fertilizer, it's completely different the way it's digested and it's released. If you look at a synthetic fertilizer, if you broadcast that, it just feeds the plant, and those plant nutrients are water soluble. The plant can uptake it. If it doesn't uptake it, it will leach out. If you look at an organic-based fertilizer, that's not only plant feed, it's also feeding a source for soil itself. The reason why, because all these ingredients, they exist out of organic matter with some plant nutrition into it. But that organic matter needs to be digested. And what it needs are microorganisms, and that can be bacteria or fungi. And they work together with the plant to release those minerals into it. So it's completely different. And what we've seen, we've done a trial to see if we can see a difference into the soil life, if it's beneficial for soil life compared with a synthetic fertilizer. If you look at the carbon sources, that's a feeding source for soil life itself. We've taken some potting soil and added and mixed in a mineral fertilizer. And then we wanted to see what's going on with the bacterial life. You can see here, A, B, C, and so on. These are all different bacteria species. 1, 2, 3, 4 is what we've measured, the amount of species during 4 different types of potting soil. And we've doubled that 5, 6, 7, 8, and 19 till 12. So we've mirroring those bacteria species. And you can see when it's yellow, that's already existing amount of soil life into the potting soil itself. But if you see a red, that's a decreased amount of soil life. And if you see green, that's an increased amount of soil life. If you look at the mineral fertilizer, you see a lot of yellow and you see some red and a bit of the green. If you take that same potting soil and you incorporate a mini-gram fertilizer, organically based, you can see that everything is green. The reason why is because all these mini-gram fertilizers, they contain carbon. And carbon needs to be digested by soil life, so it's a feeding source for soil life itself. So in the beginning, I said we're looking at healthy plants, and we can see that the fertilizer is okay, but if you can add something into the soil that's also beneficial for soil life itself, it's even better for the plant. The second thing, what we're looking for, we've got all these 40 ingredients. We know the NPK words. We know the content of carbon sources. We want to know the longevity of that product. Long ago, we only had chicken manure and we didn't know the release pattern of that stuff. So what we've done, we've got all different ingredients into it, till 12 in one fertilizer. So we got horn meal, we got bone meal, we got everything incorporated. The reason why, because all these specific different carbon sources, they've got their own hardness. You compare bone meal takes a long time to be digested. So the longevity of that bone meal is going to be much longer than, for example, blood meal or even wheat. So what we've seen, if you incorporate different carbon sources into a fertilizer, you've got a longevity of 70 days, 100 days, or even 150 days. How that comes is because we're looking at the ingredients. They've got their specific release. And in the end, because it's not available straight away, everything is water soluble, there's less leaching. And we've seen that. We've done trials. The more ingredients we use into a fertilizer, the longevity is going to be much and much better, because the release is not in just 1 week, but it will a couple of weeks or even months. So what we have in our products, and we talk about that later on, we got about 12 different ingredients in just one fertilizer, and that makes it specifically different than all the other organic fertilizers we see in the market. That gives you in the end less leaching, because the plant can't uptake everything straight away because it's not available straight away. But in the end, when it starts to rain and it starts to leach, if it's available straight away, it will leach out much quicker when it's not available straight away. So we've done a trial, and you can see it's up to 4 times less leaching into the environment. And the reason why is because we're looking at different carbon sources. One carbon source takes a week, the other one takes 2 weeks, the other one takes 3 or 4 weeks or 5 weeks, and so on. We got all these ingredients. We know the NPKs. We know the time of releasing. Now we want to make that into a really small particle. And we've got the production of the mini-gram. And the mini-gram is actually A really small particle that contains exactly the same NPK in every small particle. And if you look at the weight, for example, you got a pellet. A pellet is exactly the same weight as 94 milligram granules. So if you incorporate this into potting soil, it's much, much better divided. And also, if you look at one of those particles, really small particles of the milligram, you can even see all the ingredients in that particle. So how do we do it? We're looking at the biodiversity, lots of different ingredients out of vegetable or animal ingredients. We'll look at the longevity. The longevity is done because all these ingredients, they've got their own carbon, and some of the carbon is really hard, lignin, and some of the carbon like cellulose or hemicellulose, that takes a couple of weeks. And that gives you that longevity till about 100 till 150 days. And then we're looking at the uniform distribution made by that small milligram particle. And that's what we called the milligram technology, soil fertility redefined. Are there any questions? You see the chat.
None come in so far, Erwin, so I think you're playing a blinder.
Okay.
Everything's clear. Thanks.
Why doesn't it work anymore? I'm talking about the product, and you guys are really into the practical way. So I want to show you some trials we've done in the open field. For example, we've got a product that's called the longevity till about 150 days. Before that, we have products that worked only for about 70 days, 50 days. Because we could manufacture that mini-gram technology, we have a product that will work till about 150 days. We've done trials with that product years ago. And what we do nowadays back home, we're not broadcasting it over the whole field. No, we use this as a in-farrow fertilizer. So you use less fertilizer, but it's much better than just to broadcast it everywhere. We've done that trial with the product that's called Extra Mix 1. It's got a 16.38 NPK. The reason why we use this product, because before that we had a Mix 5, but the longevity of that product was a bit too short. And especially in Laurus, for example, prunus, you can't just drive through that prunus every couple of months. So we've done a trial with the fertilization test with a mineral fertilizer compared with the Mix 5, the product we also always use into tree nurseries. One time and one plot with 2 times. We had the NK mix, that's one without the phosphorus, because we had a big issue with phosphorus in the Netherlands. And then we had the new product, the 16.38. And we had a competitor that's called the Orcamate. We used fertilizers applied in row fertilization, and we started in April 2013. So it's a product that's been sold quite long already here. During the season, we saw some differences compared with the mineral. We saw more growth in height, stuffed plants, fewer open places, and some greener leaf color. But we want to know in the end how things are going. So what did we do? We took all the plots out of the field, took them all next together, and we had 10 growers. They had to pick out what could be the best. And in the end, you can see that in that schedule, the 16.38, the product that we were looking for, we used it only once with 375 kilograms a hectare, came out the best. If you look at this one, the Mix 5, that's the product we also sold, but we had to adjust that 3 times. So much less labor because we're only using this once, with the best results we could see. Are there any questions?
Yeah, there's one there, Erwin.
Okay.
Our second one in. So the first one in, how does this product perform in cold conditions with bacteria and microbes? are less active.
Yeah, they are less active. So that's the reason why we also incorporate some minerals into it. If there's a question about we need that growth also during some cold periods, we've got lots of tulips over here, Dutch tulips, exactly the same question. So that's why we add some, or if that's necessary, some mineral into it.
Okay.
But it needs temperature. Organic fertilizers, they need some temperature to be digested. That's the thing.
Yeah. Okay. And I suppose that's where you've got longer season ranges as well on them, so that can come into play.
Yeah, I've got some really funny experience because I'm working in the States also, and I've got one big customer in Arizona. Arizona is quite warm. It's a desert, and we've seen the performance of this same product that's going to be much longer, because in the heat period there's also no digestion of that product. And he used to use a lot of CRFs into it, but the problem with the CRF is when it's really hot, it's still releasing NPKs, but the plant doesn't need it. And the big advance you have with this product, because there's no digestion, the plant only needs water because it wants to survive, and there's no salt into the soil straight away. So it's working more together as the plant starts to grow. That's the benefit.
Okay. There's a couple of questions there, so we'll maybe look at them and then come back to the presentation. Some retailers do not accept organic fertilizers with animal constituents. Are there products which do not have any of that?
Yeah,
okay.
We have products that only contain plant organic waste material. So we sell quite a lot into herbs, and those guys, they just want to have that fertilizer without any animal ingredients into it.
Perfect. Okay. And two questions then about the Laurel trial that you showed some results from. The first one is what was the pH of the soil in the trial area?
It's sandy soil, pH about 5.5, 6. Yeah.
Okay. Quite acidic. And then the question about the graph, what was measured? I think that was some quality components, but there was also size. Yeah. Were there any statistical significant differences?
Yeah, we took those 10 growers to check it, and we just gave them some paperwork so they could write down 1 till 10. We've got some statistic trials on the website, and that's done by Delphi and all those guys. So you can check that also.
Okay. I'll take two more questions and then we'll hold off until the end, if that's okay. The first one is about price. In comparison to, how is the product price in comparison to mineral CRFs such as Osmocote?
CRFs are much more expensive.
Okay.
That's a big problem. I think Sean can answer that, because Sean, you guys are selling the products, both products actually.
Yeah, what we're looking at in DCM and Osmocotes have gone up quite in the last 12 months, especially with the mineral fertilizer price. So we're actually looking now, whereas if we went back 3 years ago, it wasn't cost of, there was about the same putting 2 kilograms of DCM in or a kilogram of Osmocote in, but now actually the DCM is swung the other way. Putting the DCM is actually cheaper per cubic meter than using the mineral fertilizer.
Okay, it's a nice scenario to be in. I guess that the DCM is more competitive, and I guess it's quite dynamic at the moment as well. Prices will change, and
prices will change. Depends on which Osmocote you use. There is some if you're using the high quality Osmocotes, then they are quite expensive. They are good products, so we try to mix, as you see in my presentation now, we're trying to mix the Osmocote with the DCM, so you get the benefit of the both, because they're both good products. So in my presentation, we're going to look at some of the trials I've been doing with hardy stock bedding growers. We start off here with a Geranium nursery growing in peat reduced. This grower grows only on DCM. He incorporates up to 5 kilograms in the soil. For geraniums, are quite hungry. and then he'll just feed calcium nitrate depending on soil analysis what's needed. What we found is we're getting a more compact growth. We're not getting the yellow leaves around the bottom, and as you can see, the roots are nice and white and healthy from the soil life. You'll see from the first picture the nice even growth. Good. So we talked about animal ingredients. On these 4 products, these have got animal ingredients in, the Eco 1, the Eco 5, the Eco 3, and the Eco 4. We're using these in Eco 4 is more for seeding mixes. This is used in organic growing. The Eco 1 is used in for seeding and peat free. So we've got a big peat free producer who uses Eco 1 in all their peat free mixes to supply. The Eco 5 is used in most potting mixes, again used by a big potting supplier with all in their potting mixes in peat free and peat. And most of the trials you'll see using these ingredients. Eco 3, we use these in conjunction with more hungry plants, so you get an extra nitrogen organic N over 100 days in conjunction of the Eco 5 with the 856. The difference being, although you got more N, it's releasing at a very slow rate, so it's more available to the plant and less likely to leach. All these ingredients have the controlled organic release. They all can be used in organic crops, and the products use the mini-grain technology. So we go to the next slide. All these products here are plant, vegetable, organic material. They're no animal-based products. So we've got the micro mix, which is the trace elements. You'll see a trial later on in the presentation where we did against the mineral micro max and how it performed. Then we got the Vivisol, that's a soil improver, vegetable based. We've got the Vivicali, which is high potassium. Again, if you've got a crop looking at more potassium, you can add, you could add each one together. So you could use like the EcoPlant 7 and the Eco Vivicali together to get a more potassium based. Again, all these ingredients of vegetable sources can be used in organic crops, and they're all produced with mini-grain technology. So we start off with the micro mix. Nutrients is compound or organic soil improver as well. It's don't just give the micro nutrients, a bit like what Erwin said, they've all got a soil improver in them as well. That's the natural soil improver, rich in gut and organic matter with the mini-grain technology. It has a controlled release of 75 to 100 days, but I think as you see from my trial, it lasted up to 6 months. They're the percentages of each of the trace elements: 25% boron, 25% copper, 1% iron, 0.5%, not 25%, 0.25%, sorry, 0.5% manganese, 0.2% molybdenum, and 0.4% zinc. And each one of these, as we know, have all got their own action in the plants, and they're very important. I think the trace elements in the plant is just as important as the major nutrients, as you will see from the trials in a minute. All of the mixes have the micro mix in. So we use a rate of about 150 grams, 250 grams per cubic meter. As with the micro, major elements are usually around about 1-2 kilograms. As with all micro mixes, they have a very less in a potting mix. It can be used for growing indoor and outdoor plants, for plants that quickly show deficiency. It helps the micro. This is why the micro mix is proven in deficiencies. This is a camellia crop potted start of July. On the left hand side, you'll see the organic micro mix at 200 grams per cubic meter. On the right, you'll see the mineral micro max at 250 grams per cubic meter. These are all grown in the same greenhouse next to each other with the same water in. They've got Osmocote in and DCM in the potting mix as well for longevity. The Osmocote's there for longevity. The DCM's there for the start of the life. As you can see with the micro mix, just go back a little bit, Erwin, sorry. Just want to say about the greenness. If you look at the greenness with the micro the organic micro mix, you got a better greening due to the iron levels. Also with the magnesium toxicity, we did soil analysis. These are grown at about pH 5. With the micro max was looking at a bit, is going into toxicity, and the micro mix still was and at a good level. It wasn't going into that toxicity, and uniformity in the crop was better. This was in December, so these was potted at the start of July. In December, we took some pictures to see what it was like about 6 months after the crop. The crop on the left is there in a 1 litre. You can see the roots are white. On the plant on the right hand side is the one with the micro mix, and the one on the left is the micro max. So the rooting is nice and white, both of them. There is more root there down to the soil life. If you look on the picture on the right, again, the micro mix, the organic is on the right, the micro max is on the left. You can see the greenness in the leaf where camellia do suffer with iron deficiency. The micro mix, the organic, has actually helped with all the other nutrients what are there as well, to be nice and green. Then we come to the Ecore Mix 5, which is the 856. This is the popular one we use in potting mixes. It gives you 100 to 150 days nutrition in bedding and hardy stock. Application is dependent on the time of year. If we're going into the spring, it'll be a higher rate. Going into autumn, it'll be a lower rate, and depending on what crop we're growing as well. It can be top dressed or incorporated. And as you'll see, some of the best results we've used with this is outside plants on load feeding programs where we've had heavy rainfall. This has been quite as good as a top dress on stuff like lavender, but you'll see a trial later on in this slide. So on this slide, you'll see 3 different scenarios. The one on the left is 100% peat free bedding in a 10.5 centimetre pot. The rooting is very good. This mix has 3 kilograms of the Ecore 5 in. It has the micro mix in, and this grower always grows with the Vivisol, the Vivisol being a soil improver. This helps the breakdown of the DCM. It also helps with the rooting and the soil life. The plant in the middle is lavender outside. This was potted early April. This was took in mid-May. You'll see a good rooting. The only liquid fertilizer this is had is calcium nitrate, and it was top dressed with the Ecore Mix 5. On the right is watercress, organically grown, not there to use liquid fertilizer. We've got a mixture of the DCM into that watercress. We also use the Vivicali at 2 kilograms to give a more harder, shorter plug. In a primula crop potted week 38, these are going to go over winter. We know primulas are grown cold. So the 2 pots on the left are just been fed with mineral fertilizer, no DCM. The 2 pots on the right has got 3 kilograms of the DCM Ecore 5 and the micro mix. You can see the rooting is already more whiter, more thicker, the soil life in the DCM. And we mainly see the benefits of the DCM going into February, March, when the primulas, on these primulas, and we had no yellow leaves around the bottom. We had a stronger flower. We didn't have the disease problems. If the crop weren't sold on time, the flower seemed to have a better shelf life. So this is a bedding crop done in August. This is when we first started using the DCM in the UK with a small grower. He broadcasted across the top. The picture on the right, you can see the DCM on top of the pack. The distribution, as Erwin showed you earlier, with 94 milligrams to 1 pellet. I think this shows this a nice uniform over the pack. This has just been broadcast across the top, and the plants on the left is the sort of benefits you get from that uniformity. This shows a picture of them plants before, just to show that I hadn't just gone in and had picked the 3 best packs out. The uniformity down the bed is there to see. Very little growth control. We reduced the crop growth control by probably 25-30%. and then if you can see, if you look across them, there's nice, short, compact, good nutrition. The flower strength going into October was very good. We wasn't getting botrytis spotting on the pansy, and the crop was all sold. Again, in the autumn, wallflowers has been the biggest problem for some growers, getting yellow leaves around the bottom, uniformity. Again, using the DCM at 3 grams per litre, the micro mix, is gathers that, stop that yellowing from the nitrogen deficiency without using too much nitrogen, so you don't get the uneven in the growth. Again, the crops in the middle on the outside, pansies and violas, they're grown with no growth control. This was in September. So we just relied on the DCM, and the grower agreed just to leave how they would grow to see the uniformity on there. And the only really mineral fertilizer that went on them was a calcium nitrate, potassium nitrate mix. Because we had the NPK in there already from the DCM, it's allowed us to use straight fertilizers like calcium, potassium to whatever the plants needed from soil analysis. Rosemary, food crop. These are grown for ornamental use. These have a kilogram of Osmocote in, 3 kilograms of DCM in. We wanted to see, with the extra growing time, the one on the left, the one with the sign in was potted in August, and the one next to it was in September. You can see a month's growing different. As we was going, so this year we've moved all our potting into September for this grower. We're getting a more uniform, strong. You can see down the beds, the good uniformity down the beds. And we're getting because we're getting a stronger growth, and we're getting less disease pressure as well. Poinsettias is always a challenge in peat and peat free. This grower did a mixture of both. He uses the organic fertilizers in all his crops. This has got the Vivisol in at 1 kilogram per cubic meter. It's got the DCM equal 5 in at 2 kilograms per cubic meter. It's also got the micro mix, and then it was just fed with calcium nitrate, potassium nitrate mix, just to keep the greenness and size. We had good shoots in the poinsettias, and as you can see from the pictures, good roots and good quality. And then we go on to 100% peat-free bedding. So we got a Perennial Saxophonia. These was potted in week 44. These only had 3 kilograms of DCM in the micro mix. No liquid fertilization was given. These were sold mid-January, February. Again, the uniformity was very good. The color was very good. The flower was very good. No liquid fertilizer was used on these, although we know that we need temperature to get the organics working. It's what temperature, because these, as the plants were ticking over and active, so was the organics. With the Osmocote, you wouldn't get that in the winter. You'd struggle, and you wouldn't want to be liquid feeding unnecessary. And then on petunias, just go back one. On the petunias on the right hand side in the spring, these had equal mix 5 in the micro mix, so you can see good color, good uniformity, good strength, especially for Saphinia, we can get a bit out of control and sometimes suffer with iron deficiency. On a more hungry, this is Dahlia and Geranium in 5 litre pots. This is where we use the equal mix 3, which is a higher nitrogen. We mix with so we probably put 3 kilograms of the equal 5 in, and then we put the 2 kilograms of the equal mix 3 in. Although that gives you a nitrogen of 20, because it's organic, it's released over the 100 to 120 days in this time of year. You can see nice compact growth, no stretch growth, and the grower's only got to add a bit of calcium nitrate as and when it's needed. Good colour, no yellow leaves around the bottom. Cyclamen going into the autumn, 1 litre cyclamen, uniformity on flower is sometimes hard to achieve on some varieties. With the organic fertilizer in a peat free, again, the equal 5, the eco mix, the micro mix, and the Vivisol, good rooting was seen on all through the crop. No problems with Fusarium, no problems with disease, good uniformity on the flower. and good sales. We managed to clear the crop. Then we go into hardy stock. The biggest challenge with the organic with hardy stock is longevity. So we've looked at using the DCM at 3 grams per litre and the Vivisol at the start. We're still putting in up to 1.5 or 2 kilograms of 12 to 14 month high K Osmocote for longevity on the hardy stock. What the grower does, because he grows from pot type for the first 6 months, he'll have the DCM in at the start, and as he's coming into September, he'll go around and top dress the crop again, broadcast across. So in the winter, he just leaves the crop alone, doesn't have to do anything to it, and then in the springtime, it's all spaced out. The Osmocote is left to coat with is a hungry crop, which, we walk around and decide whether it needs top dressing with the Eco Mix 3 for high nitrogen or calcium nitrate feeding. Hydrangeas grown in May, June, July. We're using 4 kilograms of DCM. We're not using the Osmocote because it's a low pH crop. It doesn't need a lot of fertilization, but it needs just enough. Otherwise, you can have problems. It gives a good shape, good flower, and longer lasting flower on that crop as well. Again, in hardy stock, these plants were potted 10th of June, as you can see. These pictures was took at the end of July, start of August. As you can see, of all 3 here, we got good growth from the start, good colour. These have not been fed with anything else. They've got the Osmocote in for longevity, and they've got the DCM to get that health to start off with. One of the biggest things for this grower was choice here. He was having a lot of problems with choice here, coming up with a decision. Does he continue to grow it? He had to grow it in double pots. He was having problems with Pythium in the roots and losing quite a bit of stock. So we looked at the mix. We also looked at the fertilization. We felt there's too much mineral fertilization going in to make the roots not strong enough to go through the winter. So we've gone in with the Vivisol and the Eco Mix 5 at 3 kilograms per cubic meter. These pictures, the first 2 pictures on the left, was taken in June, so they're only about 5 to 6 weeks old. We've got a good root system already, and we're getting good top growth. Some plants were sold in the September, even before winter, but a lot of the crop was top dressed again to go through the winter. Wastage was about 1%. We didn't have to double pot anything now, and now the growers took the decision he's actually doubled his production on choice ears. So it's not all down to the organic fertilizer, it's down to the compost and getting the feed right with the Osmocote. This is where we said that a mineral and an organic can work together, is getting the balance with the organics. This is the lavender outside. This is where the organics and the DCM really come in on their own. This is the lavender crop. This grower's always suffered outside getting the right nutrition, especially through April and May in the UK. You can get quite a heavy rain. So the nutrition is hard to put on. The grower doesn't like CRF. He likes to do everything by liquid. So we top dressed the crop with 3 grams per litre just after potting. Through April, we didn't do any liquid feeding. It got to about mid-May, we started doing a bit of calcium nitrate and potassium nitrate as the weather improved. And then at the end of May, started June, you can see the crop on the left, on the right-hand side was sold. Good uniformity, good nutrition. Lavender stock plants. Again, the plants were grown for so long, they got Osmocote in the compost and DCM to get the health. We top dressed these with the 1203, the Eco Mix 3, 4 weeks before cuttings was taken. Now you see the size of the foliage. This is where the mini grain really comes in on its own. It's up to 800 microns to 2000 microns big. It's very small, but it's got the ingredients. It doesn't scorch the foliage. So we just broadcasted this across. We worked out the literage, what we needed. We broadcasted it across the top, and then we watered it in quite heavily to get the mini grain into the pot. 4 weeks later, we're producing the quality we needed for the cuttings, and then that organic carries over into the cuttings, into the propagation, where you get a faster rooting, healthier plant. So on the trials I've done in the 3.5 years I've been working with Fargro, where me and Erwin met when with DCM approached Fargro, we've looked at good nutrition, healthy roots, strong plants and good growth with the organic fertilizer, which gives us healthy plants. You get a good uptake of fertilizer, whether that's the organic or the mineral. They work in conjunction. Good disease control. What I mean by that, because we've got a healthier plant, a healthier root system, and then it helps the growers using the biofungicides available, and instead of going in with hard chemistry all the time. Thank you very much.
Sean, thank you very much. That's a lot to take in, a lot of different crops there to think about. So there's a couple of questions that have come in there, so we'll go back to the Q&A and have a go with them.
Shall I stop sharing?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Erwin.
Okay.
So the first question is about the level of feed and potential for damage. So is it possible to overfeed crops with organic fertilizers? And are phytotoxic symptoms exhibiting themselves in the same way as synthetic fertilizers?
Well, Sean, you've got some experience about.
So I think what we look at is like a CRF is if we're mixing it into compost, it doesn't want to stand too long in the bowels or in the compost. But sometimes with organics, they do need that time to release them toxins as well. But we've not seen no damage from that at all. So we've got rates up to 6-7 kilograms in some mixes, which is just growers are not wanting to use any liquid fertilization. It's not available to them, or CRF in short-term crops, so they've put all in that. And again, we've not seen big leggy growth. We've seen nice even growth. So we've not seen the problems with that. So the growers who want to still a little bit control, who still want to do a bit of liquid fertilization or CRF, this is where we use the rates of 2 to 3 kilograms. Because I'm a great believer that you can still put it in, but you can't take it out. But even with the growers who have gone with a higher rate, we've not seen any issues in crops.
That's the reason why we use a lot of organic ingredients. If you only use one organic ingredient, for example, chicken manure, you might have some burning. But if the more ingredients you use into a fertilizer, the release pattern is going to be completely changing. It's going to be a longer longevity. So the release of all these NPKs is regulated by soil life. So it's not available straight away for plants. And so all the necessary salts, they're not available. They're not free.
It depends on what crop you're growing, because like any crop, you can over fertilize a crop if you put too much into a crop. So it's very crucial to get the right rate for that grower.
Yeah. I suppose a question that comes on from that, and you touched on it, was storage of growing media, and it can overheat. And especially now growers are seeing with the shift to reduce peat growing media, some people are turning their stockpiles every 2 to 3 days to prevent overheating. Is there any great difference between the behavior of organics or organic fertilizer and the kind of synthetic CRFs? Or is it maybe a little bit more resilient to that overheating?
In the peat-free, sorry, in the peat-free,
sorry, Sean, go on.
My experience on the peat-free, we stock peat-free in the yard at Fargro for smaller growers and local growers who don't want full loads. And we've got one mix we've stocked for 4 or 5 years now, which has always had the DCM in. And this can sit on pallets for a couple of months, and we've never had an issue with that fertilization. And as all the peat-free trials I'm doing with DCM in, actually we found a benefit with their nutrition. I've not seen no negativity, but I always say to growers when we talk about longevity, you should only be ordering in enough for that month anyway. Depending on the size of the grower, the thing we do at Fargro is that we stock products to overturn every month. So that's for the smaller grower who don't want a full load. But some growers are using up within 2 weeks. So I'd never say we should hold on to growing media for 4 to 6 weeks anyway. And I think peat-free, I agree with you, peat-free is a different makeup than peat. you could have peat sitting around with no CRF or any organic fertilizer in it, but you wouldn't want peat free to stand there too long without anything in it, mind with any fertilizer in it as well.
And kind of moving on from that a little bit, if you think about, there's a question here about monitoring the growing media. Can these substrates be monitored with conductivity testing as per conventional fertilization?
Well, I've been monitoring. I've had work with 2 or 3 growers who have bought the EC meters I use, and they've monitored. What we've done is we've monitored to what conductivity we're getting, which is slightly different to mineral fertilizers. It is slightly different. But if you do the soil analysis as well, with that conductivity readings and build that knowledge up, then you sort of gauge where your crop is. So it is a learning curve using the organics, a bit different to the mineral. So anyone using conductivities on minerals would always use their soil analysis to gauge where their conductivity is, because it's only a guideline.
In terms of that monitoring, are you using a probe or pour through method and looking at the leachate?
I use a probe.
Okay.
So I probe into the compost and then get them readings.
Okay, thanks. There's a good few questions there, so I'll throw them out and we'll see. So there's one on cup foliage. So the range of cup foliage species grown in Ireland needs to be well hardened by autumn, have a good green color and have good shelf life at sale. So which DCM product is recommended to give this result?
I'll give this one to you, Erwin, if you want.
Sean,
It's
got to be the Eco 5.
Yeah,
Eco 5 has its longest longevity. So all specifically to growth and species, we just check out what would fit for that different plant. We don't have a fertilizer that's universal, though they don't exist, believe me. We got to figure out what's going on. What's your potting soil? Is it a peat-free mix? Contains it some compost into it? And then we just figure out what's necessary.
Okay, so these would be field grown, the likes of Pittosporum, Viburnum, and Prunus. But if you say there's no one size fits all, then
no, we don't have a one fit size. We got that 1638, the one we use quite a lot in the open field. And the reason why we made that product is because we want to have a longer longevity, because it's too difficult to add any fertilizers during the summertime. So that's why we got that product.
You can look at you could look at mix 2, which is higher potassium. So if you do want to feed a field crop August, September wise, and you are worried about nitrogen levels, you would look at something like Vivicali, you would look at something like the mix 2, because it's the same with the hardy stock or anything like that. If we're looking to top dress in late August, early September, to get that, just to finish off that off before the winter, we always look at the more potassium based. And we wouldn't look at like the Eco Mix 3, 1203, and more nitrogen based, because obviously you don't want too much nitrogen going into the winter.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Okay. Thanks, Sean and Erwin. So a few more there. One, looking at the results of the grower trials. Some of the pictures of roots in pots suggest irrigation differences rather than fertilizer effect. And have you done replicated trials with stats and any significant results in the crop quality and which parameters, if so? And I suppose I'll go first on answering that. In our autumn nursery stock seminar, we looked at a presentation from Andreas Reda in the LKSH in Germany, and they would have looked at a range of different fertilizers including DCM, in a very structured trial. So I think that's a good one if people want to have a look back at that. But Erwin and Sean, any comments on the trial methods and how they're assessed?
Yeah, we've looked at bedding, who have been on Evan Flow benching. We looked at fertilization with drip irrigation and overhead irrigation. And because we don't get the leaching, you don't get the same effect. So even with top dressing, although you don't get it incorporated, you still get a good, like the lavender trial, that was all overhead water, and a lot of it was from the weather, but you wasn't getting the leaching, we're still getting the nutrition to the plant. As you get incorporated into your compost, you find that with the different watering systems, we always go, when I go into a nursery, the first things I look at is what growing media is being used. pots, how the grower is growing and watering system. And then the DCM is put into that at that time. So it's hard to sit here and say which is the best way. It's every nursery is different. It's the same with peat free for the nutrition when we've done on the DCM. And we've actually looked at Fargro, we brought in 2 or 3 different mixes. We started off with no fertilisation, just the base is in there. We've looked at what growers' irrigation systems are, the way they grow, what crops they grow, and then we've added the DCMs and what levels we need to be at, or the CRS with the DCMs, depending on what crop it is.
Okay. Sean, I know we're getting close to our time, so 2 quick questions to wrap up. I suppose one that goes back to basics. Why is it called controlled release fertilizer when the breakdown is done? I'll read it as it's written. Breakdown, it's down to soil, flora, and fauna dependent.
Yeah, that's true. We call this a controlled organic release, but it's not controlled as a CRF. CRF depending on water and climate, temperature. This is all dependable on soil life, but what we've seen, if we add it, that's what we've done, all the trials we've done to see how quickly is that fertilizer released. That's 100 till 150 days or 70 days. That's mentioned on the back. The only thing that we don't know is there enough soil life in the potting soil? Is there enough temperature? Is the plant still growing? Does it need more feed? So it's not like an NPK done like we used to think in micromoles, or we added a kilogram of calcium nitrate, so we got a higher level of nitrate and so on. This is completely different. And that's why Sean showed you some practical trials, because we just want to show, if you look in a practical way, you have to learn how that fertilizer is releasing its product. It's completely different way of thinking, like measuring the micromoles. It's completely different. And that's why we got less leaching, because it's releasing the nitrogen, the phosphorus, and the potassium in an organic way, in a way the plant starts to grow. It's not adding lots of NPKs and see how many of that is been uptaken by plants. It's a completely different way of growing. And we've even seen, and well Sean, we've seen it also in England. We've got big issues back home with the growth regulators. So we got a lot of trials going on using no growth regulators at all and adding our products. And the reason why we've done that is because we're always looking at the NPKs that's necessary to get that plant grown. But we look in a different way now, and we've seen that we don't need that much NPKs for that plant to grow. And that's why we use growth regulators, because we're using too much nitrogen, for example. So it starts to grow, and then we shut it down again. We use that growth regulator to stop it again. This is something completely different. And I think when we started in the UK, we only mentioned the Ecor 5, because just as a starter, just as a basic fertilizer, to get the hang of it, to feel how that works. It's completely different than just counting NPKs per season, per plant, and all that stuff. It's completely different.
One thing I'll add on to what Erwin's saying just quickly, on the water deficit trials we're doing, especially in poinsettias, and we did one this year with a company, and we had the DCM in the mix. And at the end of the water deficit trial, when you're seeing a lighter leaf, because you're trying to use less, it greened up quite quickly when we started liquid feeding more. So, and that's what the DCM gives you with that soil life as well. So actually when you go in with the fertilizer to green it up as well, because we only had a low dose in the poinsettias as a background, and it just working well in conjunction as well.
Yeah.
Sean and Erwin, thanks. We were just on 3:30. Do we have time for one short question?
Yeah, that's
yes,
no problem.
No problem.
Just as another one comes in. This one is about growing media, but have you investigated if the product changes the physical properties of peat-free media? And it also addresses irrigation in that question, but I think we've kind of touched on that.
Yeah, we've looked at I work a lot with Jiffy. We look at the airfield porosity and mixes very closely when we're changing the structure from peat into peat-free. We've gone with lower coir based peat-free mixes because of weight, because of cost. but we have actually found that's not been a negative. What we found out with some of the big growers I've been working with this year, when I ask them, how's the watering been compared to peat? It's only been slightly different. It's not been a problem. They're not using more water. They're not. It doesn't through the winter. It hasn't dried out no differently. So water, if you get the mixes right, I think we are doing. We've improved a lot over the years. In all the companies, the growing medium companies, actually the watering is actually better.
Water uptake is probably improved in the plant as well.
Yeah, we've grown with the we've got wetting agents in the growing media like most companies have now, and they're working a lot better as well. They're better made, so that's good. Yeah.
Okay. Sean and Erwin, that's been a huge amount of information. Really interesting. The time has flown by. So while there's still questions coming in, I think we'll have to wrap it up there for today. If people want to find out more, getting in touch with you, can I share your email address?
Yeah, that's
I'll
no
put it in
problem at all.
the links when this goes up on the web. Yeah.
Yep.
Great. So I'll bring the webinar to a close. I'll say, Erwin and Sean, thanks a million for taking time to prepare for today and to join us and answer the questions. It's been really interesting and informative to see a different approach, I think, to fertilizers and to supporting plant growth. So it's very good. And a big thank you as well to everybody who's joined this afternoon and contributed to the presentation as well with questions and the discussion. So thank you all. We'll post this up in the next few days on our YouTube channel and on the Teagasc website. And we'll have another webinar in the coming weeks. So just keep an eye on our Twitter page or on the Teagasc event page as well, and we'll circulate details as we have them confirmed. So with that, I'll just say thank you all. Thanks, Sean, and thanks, Erwin, and take care.
Much.
Take care. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.